The sands of Egypt stretch endlessly beneath the burning sun, as the mighty Nile winds its way through the heart of an ancient land. A land where gods once walked alongside kings, where monuments soared into the heavens, and where the line between myth and reality blurred. And yet, even in this world of divine rulers and timeless dynasties, there remains one name whispered through the ages that stands above the rest: Cleopatra. But she was no myth. Cleopatra was a living, breathing queen who ruled one of the most powerful and ancient civilizations on earth. She was a woman of fierce intelligence, cunning, and extraordinary charm. Her reign saw the rise and fall of empires, the passion and betrayal of history's most powerful men, and ultimately the end of Egypt's independence after 3,000 years of pharaonic rule. She was the last pharaoh, a queen who fought not just for her throne, but for her legacy and her people in the final act of Egypt's long and storied history. Cleopatra's life is a tale of ambition and desperation, of love and war, and of a queen's struggle to navigate the treacherous tides of a world on the brink of change. This is her story. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE into a world already filled with intrigue. Egypt, once the undisputed superpower of the ancient world, was now a shadow of its former glory. Yet, it still held immense wealth, and its strategic position made it the prize of empires. At the time of Cleopatra's birth, Egypt was ruled by the Ptolemies, a Macedonian Greek dynasty that had ruled Egypt since the death of Alexander the Great. But this was a dynasty on shaky ground, plagued by infighting, civil wars, and political instability. Cleopatra, the daughter of King Ptolemy XII, grew up in this dangerous world, learning early on that survival in the Ptolemaic court required not just intelligence, but a razor-sharp wit and a deep understanding of politics. Unlike her forebears, Cleopatra didn't distance herself from the Egyptian people. She studied their language, honored their gods, and embraced the image of the living goddess Isis. To her, Egypt was more than just a kingdom. It was a legacy she intended to protect. By the time she was just 18 years old, Cleopatra had ascended to the throne as co-ruler alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. But her rule was far from secure. Her brother, controlled by a faction of corrupt courtiers, sought to wrest power from her. Cleopatra, now at the mercy of palace intrigue, found herself forced into exile. It seemed, for a moment, that her reign would end before it even began. But Cleopatra, as history would soon learn, was not one to surrender easily. In the cold, barren deserts of Syria, she planned her return to power. She would not return to Egypt as a fleeing queen, but as a conqueror. And she would do so with the most powerful ally in the known world. It was the year 48 BCE. Julius Caesar, the conqueror of Gaul, the most powerful man in Rome, had arrived in Egypt in pursuit of his own enemy, Pompey. Unbeknownst to him, Pompey had already been murdered by Ptolemy XIII's advisors, an attempt to curry favor with Caesar. But this brutal act only disgusted Caesar, and soon he found himself caught in the midst of Egypt's own civil war. As Caesar took up residence in Alexandria, Cleopatra knew this was her chance. She would have to gamble everything. With nothing more than her intelligence and daring, she devised a plan to meet the Roman general in secret. It's said that she had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence, wrapped in a linen sack or carpet. Whether fact or fiction, the image of Cleopatra emerging before Caesar, confident and charismatic, would become one of the most iconic moments in history. For Caesar, Cleopatra was more than just a deposed queen seeking her throne. She was a vision of Egypt's glory and potential. Cleopatra, for her part, saw Caesar as her ticket back to power, but also as a man who could secure Egypt's future. Their relationship quickly became more than political. Cleopatra charmed Caesar not just with her beauty but with her intellect. She spoke 7 languages, understood the complexities of the world, and shared with Caesar a vision for the future. Together they overthrew Ptolemy XIII, and Cleopatra was restored to her throne. By Caesar's side, Cleopatra would embark on one of the most fascinating chapters of her reign, and soon their union would produce a son, Ptolemy Caesar, known to the Egyptians as Caesarion. Cleopatra envisioned a future where her son would rule a united Egypt and Rome, the master of 2 worlds. But such dreams were not meant to be. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra made a bold move. She traveled to Rome with Caesarion, taking up residence in one of Caesar's estates. Rome, at the time, was the center of the world, an empire expanding by the day, swallowing up territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. And into this Roman world stepped Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, the living embodiment of luxury and power. Rome was awestruck. Cleopatra's presence was like something out of legend. She was different from any other ruler the Romans had encountered. She was an educated, eloquent queen who walked with the authority of a goddess. To the Romans, she was both fascinating and threatening. But her presence was also divisive. While Caesar was enamored with her, many in Rome viewed her as a foreign queen who had bewitched their leader. The Roman Senate, already suspicious of Caesar's growing power, saw Cleopatra as a threat to Rome's republican ideals. They feared her influence over Caesar and the implications of Caesarion, his son, but not born of Roman blood. Cleopatra's position in Rome was always precarious. And then, the unthinkable happened. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was assassinated, stabbed to death by his own Senate, and Cleopatra's protector was gone. With Rome in chaos, Cleopatra fled back to Egypt. Her dreams of a future with Caesar died with him, and once again, she was left to navigate a dangerous world. For 2 years, Cleopatra ruled Egypt in relative peace. But in Rome, power was once again shifting. Caesar's assassination left a power vacuum, and Rome was divided between Caesar's heir, Octavian, and one of his most trusted generals, Mark Antony. Cleopatra knew that to secure her kingdom's future, she needed to align herself with one of these men, and in 41 BCE, Antony summoned her to meet him in Tarsus, in what is now modern Turkey. This was no ordinary political meeting. Antony, much like Caesar before him, was captivated by Cleopatra, but Cleopatra too was drawn to Antony. He was strong, charismatic, and perhaps most importantly, he was ambitious. Their relationship quickly blossomed into both a political and personal alliance. Antony granted Cleopatra territories that expanded Egypt's borders, and in return, Cleopatra supported him with wealth and resources. Together, they dreamt of creating a powerful Eastern Empire, one that could rival Rome itself. For Cleopatra, this was not just about love, it was about survival. She knew that Egypt, surrounded by the growing power of Rome, could not remain independent without strong allies, and she believed that with Antony by her side, she could secure Egypt's future. But the forces arrayed against them were too great. By 31 BCE, the alliance between Cleopatra and Antony had reached its final, tragic act. Octavian, Caesar's heir, had grown powerful, and he was determined to crush Antony and Cleopatra once and for all. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Actium, a naval battle fought off the coast of Greece. On that fateful day, the combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian's navy. But the battle quickly turned against them. In a desperate move, Cleopatra's ships broke from the battle and fled back to Egypt. Antony, seeing her retreat, followed. The battle was lost, and with it, their hopes of an Eastern Empire. Back in Alexandria, Antony and Cleopatra were cornered. Octavian's forces closed in, and Antony, believing Cleopatra had already taken her own life, fell on his sword. As he lay dying, Cleopatra sent for him, and in one final, tragic embrace, they shared their last moments together. Antony died in her arms. Cleopatra, now left alone, faced a grim future. Octavian intended to bring her back to Rome in chains, parading her through the streets in a victory triumph. But Cleopatra, ever the queen, refused to allow herself to be humiliated. In one final act of defiance, she took her own life, possibly with the bite of an SP, a snake sacred to the Egyptians, aligning her death with her divine identity as the goddess Isis. With Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, the long and storied line of the pharaohs came to an end. Egypt, once the land of towering pyramids, endless deserts, and untold wealth, was now absorbed into the Roman Empire as a mere province. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years, was extinguished with Cleopatra's last breath. Octavian, who would later become Emperor Augustus, had won the struggle for power. He stood victorious, not only over Mark Antony but over Cleopatra, the last true threat to Rome's dominance. Her kingdom, her wealth, her people, all now belonged to Rome. But Cleopatra had secured her final victory in a way Octavian could never erase. She would not be paraded in his triumph, humiliated before the Roman masses. She left the world on her own terms, as a queen should. But Cleopatra's story does not end with her death. In many ways, it was only the beginning. Her life has inspired generations of storytellers, poets, historians, and even rulers. From the moment she died, Cleopatra was immortalized in legend. Roman writers, particularly those loyal to Augustus, would paint Cleopatra as the ultimate seductress, dangerous, manipulative, and ambitious beyond reason. For them, she was a foreign queen who had dared to challenge the might of Rome. To the Romans, she was a cautionary tale of what happens when a ruler's ambition and passions collide. But was she truly the femme fatale history so often depicts her as? If we peel back the layers of propaganda and myth, a different Cleopatra emerges, one of profound intelligence, a gifted diplomat, a ruler who understood the balance of power, and a queen who used every tool at her disposal to safeguard her kingdom in an age of shifting empires. She was not simply a seductress but a sovereign who held her own in a male-dominated world. Cleopatra spoke at least 9 languages and understood the intricacies of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman politics. She was a woman who navigated some of the most dangerous waters of the ancient world and forged alliances with 2 of Rome's most powerful men. She stood, for a brief moment, at the center of world history, and even in defeat, her legacy was not diminished. Cleopatra's Egypt was a place of remarkable cultural blending, a crossroads between the ancient world and the rapidly expanding Roman Empire. As a ruler, she carried the weight of over 3,000 years of Egyptian civilization, stretching back to the time of the pyramids and the god kings. In her capital of Alexandria, she presided over a world where the old gods of Egypt stood alongside Greek and Roman philosophies. It was a place where scholars, mathematicians, and astronomers pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. The Library of Alexandria, a beacon of wisdom in the ancient world, flourished during her reign. Cleopatra sought not only to preserve Egypt, but to elevate it, positioning it as a key power in the Mediterranean world. She aligned herself with Rome, not out of weakness but as part of a grand strategy to ensure that Egypt remained central to the region's future. Cleopatra understood that the world was changing, that the age of empires was dawning, and that only those who could adapt would survive. But fate, and the tides of history, were not on her side. The wealth of Egypt would fuel Rome's rise to dominance, and Egypt itself, with its rich resources, became one of the jewels of the Roman Empire. But while Egypt became a province, its cultural influence, shaped during Cleopatra's reign, endured for centuries. Roman emperors, such as Augustus, would visit the land of the Nile and marvel at its ancient temples, its monuments to gods and kings long gone, and the legacy of its last queen. Over 2,000 years have passed since Cleopatra's death, but her story remains as captivating today as it was in ancient times. She has been depicted in countless works of art, literature, and film, each generation recreating Cleopatra in its own image. To some, she is the ultimate symbol of power and seduction. To others, she is a tragic figure, caught in the web of Roman politics, doomed by her love for Antony. But who was Cleopatra really? Was she the manipulative temptress of Roman propaganda? Or was she, perhaps, one of the last true heirs to Egypt's pharaonic tradition, a queen who fought until the very end to preserve her country's independence? In reality, Cleopatra was both more and less than the myth. She was a woman who wielded immense power in a world that often denied it to women. She was a mother, a lover, a politician, and a warrior. Her life, like Egypt itself, was a blend of contradictions, rich in beauty and culture, but also shaped by harsh realities and unrelenting ambition. Her ability to shape-shift, to adapt to her circumstances, may be her greatest legacy. Cleopatra's identity as both a Greek queen and an Egyptian pharaoh speaks to her unique ability to bridge cultures, to move seamlessly between worlds. It is this ability that allowed her to leave such a lasting mark, even in defeat. Even after her death, Cleopatra's legacy influenced the world she left behind. Rome would go on to dominate the Mediterranean, but Cleopatra's influence could be felt even within the Roman Empire itself. Roman emperors admired her resourcefulness, and Augustus, though he vanquished her, knew Cleopatra was a formidable rival. It is said that Augustus kept a statue of Cleopatra in his villa, a testament to the fact that even in victory, Cleopatra remained unforgettable. And her impact did not stop there. During the Renaissance, when Europe rediscovered the art and culture of the ancient world, Cleopatra's story was retold as one of elegance, intellect, and beauty. Playwrights, such as William Shakespeare, would bring her tragic romance with Antony to life on stage, and through him, Cleopatra would be reborn, time and time again. In the centuries that followed, Cleopatra continued to inspire artists, writers, and rulers alike. Napoleon studied her reign. Elizabeth Taylor immortalized her on the silver screen. From opera to painting, from poetry to film, Cleopatra has become a symbol of ambition, love, and loss. In the end, Cleopatra's life was not just the story of the last pharaoh of Egypt. It was the story of a world in transition, a queen who stood at the crossroads of history as an ancient civilization gave way to a new order. She was the last sovereign of one of the world's greatest dynasties, a ruler who fought to preserve her people and her legacy in the face of overwhelming odds. But Cleopatra was not just a queen. She was an idea, a symbol of strength, cunning, and ambition. She was a woman who dared to challenge the greatest empire of her time, who defied the expectations of her world, and who refused to let history forget her. And in that she succeeded. More than 2 millennia later, her story continues to capture the imagination of the world. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, did not vanish into the sands of time. She became timeless. If you're captivated by stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Ancient Perspectives for more epic tales of history's greatest figures and moments. Hit the bell icon to never miss an adventure into the past.